Welcome back to the Real News Network. I'm Paul Jay, and we're in Jerusalem. Michel Warshawski, author of On the Border, writes in his introduction, he quotes the former Prime Minister Ehud Barak, "We are in a villa in the heart of the jungle," says Barak, the man principally responsible for the failure of the Oslo peace process. This description of Israel and its surrounds is a summary of a political philosophy that sees the Arab world and the Palestinians not as enemies to be fought with everything in one's power until, sooner or later, one can negotiate with them, make peace and reconcile, but rather as an existential threat, ferocious beasts, barbarians. In the face of such a threat, the very idea of negotiations becomes absurd, for only permanent, preventative, and total war can try to subdue the threat of the jungle. If history can still teach us anything at all, then indeed this outlook has little chance of success. Now joining us is Michel Warshawski. Thanks for joining us again.
Hello.
So this image of Israel as a villa in the jungle, surrounded now with a wall. Talk about this.
The wall is the ultimate physical expression of something much deeper, which is the philosophy of separation. Entrenched in the Zionist ideology is the idea that only homogeneity is normality. This is not an invention of Zionism. At the turn of the 20th century, it was very common to create states as ethnically pure as possible from the collapse of the big empires. A state for the Czech, a state for the Slovens, a state for the Greeks, and a state for the Jews. Why not? This was the idea of Zionism. If everyone has his own ethnic state, we want to have ours. Palestine becoming, at a certain stage, the only place to have it. But the idea was, first of all, to have our state for us, even in Uganda, maybe. In that sense, separation is a supreme value of the Israeli culture. Not only separation from the Arabs, in fact. You look how our cities are shaped. Each community trying to be separate from the other. Religious from non-religious. This neighborhood was a Kurdish neighborhood.
The one we're in now.
Where we are now. It's a conception which is exactly the exact opposite of the French conception of citizenship. Now, the wall is only a physical tool to express this kind of separation. This is why it is so popular. There is almost a consensus in Israel in support of the wall. There would be an argument whether it should be on the Green Line or where it is now. But the idea that something should really separate Jews and Arabs, Israelis and Palestinians, is consensual. We shouldn't mix. We are not against them, but they should remain where they are and we where we are. And the internal debate in Israel is not on the philosophy of separation, but where to separate and how to separate, to do it smoothly, by negotiation, or to do it unilaterally, by force, by a wall or not by a wall. But I would say in that sense, the wall is secondary. What is behind the wall? And this popularity of the wall, because it symbolizes and expresses physically separation, this is our main challenge.
It's called a security wall. The understanding of it outside Israel is the wall is supposed to protect Israelis from Palestinians, suicide bombers, and things like this. It's not for that?
Of course, it is perceived as a security element. And it's true that in the last years we have had very few terrorist actions inside Israel. But there could be two reasons. Maybe the efficiency of the wall, maybe, and it's not a small factor, the unilateral decision of Hamas to stop these activities.
Which in fact is what happened.
And they had the ability to stop it. Like in physics, when you have two variables, you don't know, you need another formula in order to know the reason.
I'm told there are sections of the wall that are actually broken down and have not been repaired, and people walk over. Is this the
very
case?
easy. I am not a military expert. I am not a scout of the Palestinians, but I can make you cross the wall in 10 places, I know. And the one who are more operational would give you 10 more.
If that's the case, then it's really to stop ordinary people from going back and forth.
Of course, the victims of the wall are not, although maybe their job is a little bit more difficult, are not the one who are ready to sacrifice their life and to explode themselves in Jerusalem or in Tel Aviv. They will find the ways. But the day-to-day life, the families, the Palestinian man or woman who wants to visit his parents on the other side of the wall, agriculture peasants who want to go to their field that is on the other side of the wall. The wall has added a lot to the intentional policy of dismantling the, I would say, Palestinian body. It was done before the wall. You need only 4 checkpoints to isolate it. Each Palestinian canton, this was Ariel Sharon plan, the cantonization of the Palestinian. Each canton, from one from the other, which is much more severe and have much more negative implication than the wall itself.
If they're over there on that side of the wall and we're over here, Israelis say, on this side of the wall, except there's more than 1 million Palestinians inside this side of the wall. So what about that?
Much more. First, we have more than 1 million Palestinian citizens of Israel, and then we have, from the Palestinians of the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, we have 450,000 Palestinians in this side, or in our side of the wall. So it's a nonsense. It is practically a nonsense. It is
But is that
efficient.
part of what the wall is about? Is, you know, given that if the international community insists, and even you could say Israel's self-image insists, that Palestinian Israelis have to have a vote, you can deal with it as long as you're sure it's a minority vote.
Of course. And this is a problem of those parties and leaders, Israeli leaders, who claim greater Israel. We want as great as possible Israel, but as a Jewish state, and Jewish in the demographic sense of the term, not with a Jewish identity, Jewish culture, Hebrew language, but a state of Jews, and as possible as Jews only. So Israel can keep, in their own conception, can remain a Jewish state as long as the non-Jews are an acceptable minority. It was never said how many, but it couldn't be more than 30% somehow. More than 30%, we are already in a binational reality. This is why even on the right wing, no one will, or very few will challenge that they should have their own something, state or cantons, because we don't want to mix, because we want to keep it as a demographically Jewish state.
When former Prime Minister Olmert left office, he said that Israel needs a two-state solution to keep a Jewish state, because you can't have occupation go on forever until the international community says, if you're going to occupy these people forever, then you're going to have to give them the vote. And once they have the vote, that's more or less the end of a Jewish state, which is a kind of pragmatic position that if you want a Jewish state, makes sense. But have they kind of opened up the door to a kind of such ferocious right that won't even accept the kind of pragmatic sense of that, just wants occupation and doesn't give a damn what the international community wants or doesn't want?
That position was relatively marginal until recently, until the last 4, 5, 6 years. Today, we have a segment in the Israeli government even that Avigdor Lieberman represents quite well, ready to confront international community, including the United States, up to a certain point. They are what I call the tail that moves the dog. And this is their philosophy. It's not true, it was Sharon's statement many years ago. It's not true that always the dog, the American dog, is moving the Israeli tail. Sometimes the tail can move the dog. And our position should be to create facts, which may even create some anger in Washington, certainly in the State Department, but ultimately they will have to cope with it.
Because strategically they need
They need
Israel in the
and they
Middle
will
East.
not fight Israel, and to be with the Arabs against Israel is out of question. There is a strong strategic alliance, not out of loving the Jews, but because of much, much bigger interest, oil in particular, a strategic place. And they know this alliance is here for a long time to be. And therefore, it's a matter of who will blink first in the relationship between the United States and we don't have to accept everything. They have to take us into consideration.
Well, one of the major facts on the ground that are being established is what's happening in Jerusalem. And so in the next segment of our interview, let's talk about Jerusalem. Please join us for the next segment of our interview on the Real News Network.